The night was cold, the kind of cold that crept through the cracks in old wood and made even a strong man shiver. John had just returned from the barn, his boots heavy with mud and his breath visible in the icy air. He lived alone at the edge of a small western town, far from neighbors and noise. The loneliness had become his closest companion since his wife passed years ago. He had learned to live with silence, to fill his days with work and his nights with memories that refused to fade. That night, as the wind howled outside, a sound broke the stillness. A knock, soft, hesitant, almost fearful. John froze. No one ever came to his door after dark. He placed the lantern on the table and walked toward the sound. The knocking came again, this time weaker, as if whoever was outside was losing strength. He opened the door, and there she was, a woman, her face pale, her clothes soaked from the snow, clutching a small child to her chest. Two other children stood beside her, their eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Please, we need warmth. My children are freezing." For a moment, John didn't know what to say. His heart felt heavy. He had seen desperate faces before, but something about hers stopped him cold. There was dignity in her suffering, a kind of quiet strength that made him step aside without another word. "Come in," he said finally. The woman hesitated before stepping inside, as if she still couldn't believe kindness was real. The children huddled near the small fire. John fetched an old blanket and wrapped it around the youngest one. "You must be hungry," he said, already reaching for bread and the last bit of stew he had left. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered a thank you. Her name was Mary, a widow whose husband had died last winter. She had tried to make it on her own, doing laundry, sewing, anything that could keep her children fed. But when the last of her supplies ran out and her landlord threw her out, she had nowhere left to go. She had walked for miles through the snow, praying someone would open a door before it was too late. John listened quietly as she spoke. He didn't interrupt. He just watched her hands tremble as she helped her children eat. Her voice broke when she mentioned her husband. He could tell she wasn't the kind of woman who begged easily. Every word she said carried the weight of pride and pain. When the children fell asleep by the fire, Mary stood near the doorway, unsure whether to sit or leave. "I'll find work," she said softly. "I can cook, clean, or help in the fields. Please don't send us away." John rubbed the back of his neck. "You and the children can stay the night," he said, his voice gentle. "We'll talk in the morning," but she didn't move. She looked at him with eyes full of fear and something else. Determination. "Sir," she said in a voice so low it almost broke, "I will warm your bed if I must. My children need a father." John stood still, his hand tightening on the edge of the table. For a long moment, neither spoke. He saw not temptation in her words, but desperation. She wasn't offering herself for gain. She was trying to save her family. The truth of it hit him deep in the heart. He stepped closer, keeping his tone calm. "You don't have to say that. You and your children will be safe here. That's all that matters tonight." Her tears fell silently and she nodded. He handed her another blanket and pointed to the small bed in the corner. "Take it. I'll sit by the fire." The storm outside grew louder, the wind beating against the walls, but inside the cabin there was warmth. Mary tucked her children under the blanket and sat near them, her body finally relaxing for the first time in days. She glanced at John sitting by the fire, his hat resting on his knee, his eyes distant but kind. He stayed awake most of the night, listening to the storm and the quiet breathing of the sleeping family. His mind went back to the days when his own house was filled with laughter. His wife's face appeared in the glow of the firelight, smiling, alive in his memory. He wondered what she would think of him now. Alone, hardened by grief, yet still unable to turn away from someone in need. Morning came slowly, the first light breaking through the frost on the windows. The air smelled of wood smoke and something else, hope. The children were still asleep, their faces peaceful. Mary was already awake, sitting by the table, mending one of John's torn shirts. He watched her silently for a moment before speaking. "You didn't have to do that," he said. She smiled weakly. "I can't just sit and do nothing. You helped us. Let me help you too." John nodded. He admired the way she carried herself, humble but not broken. He could tell she was a woman who had seen too much hardship, but refused to surrender to it. Over the next few days, the storm passed, but the widow and her children stayed. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and made sure the place felt alive again. The children's laughter filled the rooms that had been silent for years. John began to look forward to coming home from the barn. He would find them waiting, Mary stirring stew, the children playing near the fire. But deep down, Mary still felt uncertain. She didn't know how long he would let them stay. Every night she thanked him quietly, afraid that one morning he might ask her to leave. John noticed her worry but said nothing. He had grown used to his own loneliness, but now, seeing her there, he wondered how he had lived so long without another voice in the house. The sight of her calming her children, her soft laughter, the warmth she brought, it was something he hadn't realized he missed so deeply. One evening, as they sat near the fire, Mary looked at him and said softly, "I didn't mean to say those words that night. About warming your bed. I was just afraid for my children." John smiled gently. "I know. You don't have to explain." Her eyes lowered, a faint blush on her face. "You've been kinder than anyone I've known in a long time. I'll never forget it." The wind outside had calmed, replaced by the quiet of winter stars. John looked at the children sleeping near the fire and then at the woman who had walked through snow just to keep them alive. He realized then that maybe fate had sent her to his door for a reason, and though neither spoke it aloud, both felt something begin to change inside them. A quiet bond born not of pity or promise, but of shared survival and human kindness. That night, John didn't feel alone anymore. And for the first time in months, Mary allowed herself to hope that tomorrow might be better than yesterday. The sun rose gently over the snow-covered fields, painting everything in soft gold. The storm had passed, but inside John's cabin something new had begun. The laughter of children filled the air, and for the first time in many years the place felt alive. John watched from the porch as the little ones ran around the yard, their cheeks red from the cold. Mary stood near the doorway, her shawl wrapped tight, smiling as she called out for them not to slip on the ice. Life slowly found rhythm again. Mary helped in the kitchen and kept the home warm. John worked the fields and repaired the fence line. The widow's hands were never idle. She rose before dawn, baking bread, fetching water, washing clothes. The children adored John. They followed, him everywhere, helping feed the chickens, carrying small buckets of grain, asking endless questions about the animals. He found himself laughing again, a sound he had forgotten he could make. At night, they would all gather near the fire. Mary would tell soft stories to her children, her voice calm and kind. John would sit in his chair, listening quietly, sometimes adding a few words. It felt like a family, something both of them had lost long ago. But not everyone in the town saw it kindly. Word traveled fast in small places. When John went to the market one morning, a few men whispered behind his back. "He's taken in a widow," one said. "With 3 children, must be out of his mind." Another added, "He's getting too soft." John ignored them, though the words stung. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. He only knew that his heart was at peace when he came home and saw Mary smiling at him from the porch. Mary noticed the change in how people treated her too. When she went to buy flour, the storekeeper gave her a long look. Some women turned away instead of greeting her. She tried to ignore it, but deep down she felt the weight of their judgment. One evening as she was folding laundry, she said softly, "Maybe we should leave soon. I don't want trouble for you." John looked up from his work. "You're not causing trouble. You saved this place from going quiet again." "But people talk," she said, her eyes lowering. "They always do." He set his tools aside and walked over to her. "Let them talk. They don't know what we've been through. They don't know kindness when they see it." Mary nodded but didn't speak. She respected him deeply. Every day she saw the goodness in his actions, the way he treated her children like his own, the way he never raised his voice, the way he always left the last piece of bread for them. Still, she couldn't stop worrying about being a burden. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. It was the town pastor, a kind older man who had known John for years. He smiled as he stepped in, warming his hands by the fire. "John," he said, "you've done a good thing. The whole town sees it. Some might whisper, but most admire you." He turned to Mary and added, "And you, ma'am, you're stronger than most women I know. You've brought life back to this house. Mary blushed slightly, thanking him. The pastor stayed for tea and then said something before leaving that lingered in both their hearts. Two broken hearts can still build something whole if they have the courage. That night, John couldn't sleep. The words echoed in his mind. He looked across the room where Mary and the children slept peacefully. The firelight flickered across their faces. He realized then how much they had become a part of his world. He wasn't sure when it happened, but the loneliness that once filled every corner of his soul had faded away. Days turned into weeks and winter slowly began to ease. The snow melted, revealing the green fields beneath. Mary planted small flowers near the fence line, saying it made the place look more like home. The children helped, their laughter mixing with the song of the wind. John watched them from the porch, feeling something deep and quiet grow inside him. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Mary stood beside him, her hands folded in front of her. "You've given us more than we ever dreamed," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," he replied. "You brought back the sound of life to this house." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the fading light. "The night I knocked on your door," she whispered, "I didn't think anyone would answer. I was ready to give up, but you opened it without asking who I was or what I wanted. That kind of kindness, it saves people." John smiled faintly. "You were brave to ask. I just did what any man should." Silence hung between them, filled only by the soft chirping of crickets. Then Mary said something that caught him off guard. "You could have turned us away, you could have said no, but you didn't. If ever you feel lonely again, remember, you're not alone anymore." He looked at her, his heart heavy with emotion. He wanted to say something, but words felt too small. Instead, he nodded slowly, a quiet promise passing between them. Spring came fully, and with it, new beginnings. John repaired the barn roof with the help of the oldest boy. Mary began baking pies to sell in town. Soon people started talking less and buying more. Her pies became known across the valley. The same women who once looked away now came to her door with smiles and baskets, asking for her secret recipe. One Sunday, after church, the pastor spoke to the crowd. "Sometimes the Lord sends angels in need so we may remember our own hearts." Everyone knew he was talking about John and Mary. From that day, no one whispered unkind things again. A few weeks later, John came home from the fields to find the children making garlands of wildflowers. Mary stood nearby, her eyes bright. "The children say today feels special," she said, smiling. He chuckled. "And why is that?" "Because," she said softly, "we're not just guests anymore. This is our home." For a long moment, John just looked at her, realizing how much those words meant. Then he reached out and took her hand. It was a small gesture, but it said everything neither could put into words. The children cheered, not fully understanding why, only knowing it was a happy moment. That night, as stars filled the sky, John sat outside listening to the sound of laughter coming from inside the house. The same house that had once echoed with silence now glowed with warmth and life. He thought back to that cold night when a desperate knock had changed everything. Mary joined him on the porch, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," he said quietly. "It was the night I stopped being alone." She smiled gently, her eyes soft. "And I stopped being afraid." They sat together under the wide western sky, saying nothing more. The stars stretched endlessly above them, and the air was filled with peace. The world outside was still rough and uncertain, but within those wooden walls there was something strong and unbreakable: kindness, hope, and the quiet love that grows from two hearts learning to trust again. And though life on the frontier would never be easy, John and Mary faced it together, not out of need or pity, but out of the simple truth that sometimes a door opened in the storm can lead to a lifetime of warmth.